For much of the last decade, when people talk about money, they've been excitingly talking about cryptocurrencies.
Bitcoins, which you'll never have in your wallet because it's a virtual currency.
They'll be allowing customers soon to perhaps pay for a car in Bitcoin.
We're starting to see people borrowing money to get into Bitcoin.
Everything you don't understand about money combined with everything you don't understand about computers.
But are these new digital currencies something that you should actually care about? Or, as the media often tells you, are they just dangerous and a fad?
You're not investing, you're gambling.
Well, first let me ask you, what is in your pocket right now? Go on, have a little look. Maybe there's some cash, some coins, or some notes, or maybe you've only got a card. Maybe you're a bit more forward thinking and you've got none of the above. Maybe you pay with your phone. Maybe you barely have to think about money flowing in and out of your bank account. But the money is still flowing. Even if it's just a phone, I'm betting in your pocket right now, you have some means of spending money. And even though we barely think about it, the fact that we keep all our money so close, so constantly, shows how important it is. So what if I told you that we're standing on the brink of systemic change in how we look at money? A cashless society where people rely on digital technology to spend, save and make money, where there's no need for cash or coins, is soon approaching us. And since money is so critical, systemic change for the way that we use it means systemic change for you. This means that you need to care about cryptocurrencies and other financial technology that may affect you. Are you prepared on how it's going to affect your bank account, your shopping, your job? What if you work or pay cash in hand? And in which case, what will the government know about you? To help answer these questions, in this video, I'm going to explain the cashless society, what it is, when it's coming, and what it means for you.
Never leave the cave without it.
Part 1, the next evolution of money. You might not realise that cash as we know it is actually a pretty recent invention in the grand scheme of things. For example, if this wedge of cash represents all of human history, just one of these banknotes represents the length of time since money has first emerged. But before that, there were other ways of thinking about money, and money has changed a lot since. Money is always evolving, and to understand the future, we must go back to its earliest evolution. Most likely early societies used bartering when they wanted to exchange things. In other words, they would swap something they had for something they wanted, a cow for a bundle of wood or whatever. Over time, different societies developed a way to simplify this process. They started to use rare objects such as shells to represent value and exchange those items for the things that they needed instead. Later, some societies developed little tokens to represent those objects. Those were the first coins. They sprung up in Turkey, China and elsewhere. Then in the late 19th and 20th centuries, you got the rise of the first kinds of cashless payments, store credit, later credit, and debit cards. But these were always a sideshow of cash until very recently. For example, in 2017, debit cards overtook cash as the most common form of payment in the UK. And that's largely a story of technological change, the rise in shops and other organisations making it possible to use contactless and just pay with the tap of your card. And now we stand on the cusp of a future where all kinds of technological change will make cash more and more rare in society. There's all kinds of new trends and ideas that we could point to as part of this next evolution of money. But one of the most important ones is something called the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies that it supports. So what is the blockchain? Bear with me during this techie bit because it's really important for understanding the cashless society. Because blockchain technology has the potential to make cashless payments much faster and much more secure. And it can support a whole load of new digital currencies called cryptocurrencies. You might have heard of Bitcoin, for example. Blockchain is basically a new super secure method of keeping records. A block refers to a set of records. Each block has a unique code, which is called a hash. And each block is linked to another block using the previous block's hash. Many blocks are linked together in a chain. And it's near on impossible to change any of these records without someone noticing, because that would change the hash, break the chain, and break the system. This information is held on something called a ledger, which is sort of like a database. But unlike your bank's database, there's no one central authority that holds this data, meaning it's freely available for anyone to check it. This can be difficult to get your head around, but the software engineer Siddharth Malhotra has come up with a simple analogy that covers the basics. So traditional centralized systems for keeping things secure like banks are a bit like a multi-story car park. You put your car in there and you pay a company because they keep the space maintained and secure. Your car seems safe, but the fees can get expensive. And you're placing a lot of trust in that parking company. If thieves get in the front gate, they can break into everyone's cars. Meanwhile, if the population in your area grows, the car park will eventually get too busy. Then imagine lots of people near you that have 2 garages but only 1 car. And imagine that there's a system set up to let you rent out their spare garage to keep your car secure without the need for security, maintenance, and everything that comes along with a car park. Thieves who wanted to steal all the cars would have to break into every garage separately rather than just 1 car park. And because people are renting out spaces that were spare, they're likely to be cheaper than the purpose-built car park. And if the population grows, the number of spare garages available to rent will grow with it. It's a very simplified version, but blockchain is a bit like the second example with garages for rent. And in the same way, the blockchain allows for secure transactions without going through the middlemen. That's why it could speed up digital payments and why it can support those digital cryptocurrencies I mentioned. That is going to lead to big change. Because money, like I said, is always evolving. At the start of this video, I asked whether you understood the technologies that are going to reshape your life. Now you understand a little bit more, but in the rest of the video, I'm going to show you what you really need to know. What does this next evolution mean for you, your job, and your relationship with the government?
Just a second here. No, I don't have your money here. It's in Bill's house and Fred's house.
Hey, what the hell you doing with my money in your house, Fred?
Part 2, Government and the Cashless Society. A few years back, a lot of journalists got very excited about a mystery story. It revolved around someone called Satoshi Nakamoto. Or rather, someone not called Satoshi Nakamoto. That name was a pseudonym given to the still unknown computer science genius and most likely multi-billionaire who created Bitcoin. Nakamoto may even be a group of people, we just don't know. There have been repeated media exposés trying to reveal their identity, each one strongly denied and each one fueled by speculation. And as I mentioned in the last section, Bitcoin is a new digital currency or cryptocurrency which uses blockchain technology. The media circus around its founder, especially among the more nerdy communities, kind of illustrates the way that most people think of Bitcoin, a fringe obsession. At best, it's a place for weirdo techno billionaires to speculate and invest, sometimes making back their cash and sometimes losing it. At worst, it's been used as a tool for the underworld, a shady, untraceable currency that lets naughty people do naughty things. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have been used and are sometimes still used for these purposes, but they're set to become a lot more important and a lot more mainstream. For example, there's a new online banking service called Revolt. It's easy to use and it lets you convert your money into Bitcoin and other currencies. It's still a fairly niche product, but it's very user-friendly and the wider adoption of this kind of tech can't be far off. Mainstream banks will also probably follow suit. In the US, the government ruled in July of 2020 banks should be allowed to hold customers' Bitcoin in the same way as other currencies. So will ordinary people be trading Bitcoin in a matter of weeks? Probably not. But it's worth saying that Bitcoin is really volatile. The value goes up and down quickly, partially because there is a limited amount of it, unlike many currencies where governments can increase or reduce the amount in circulation. So it's not always a good idea for beginners to invest. And Bitcoin can only handle 7 transactions per second compared to Visa, who process around 1700 per second. But as the technology becomes adopted even further, more of the wealthy will start to use Bitcoin to store their cash, appreciating over time. And as Bitcoin has a limited supply, their wealth will continue to grow as more people follow suit. Because the idea of digital currencies is definitely becoming a lot more mainstream. And there's other cryptocurrencies that are solving the issues that Bitcoin currently has. Another cryptocurrency you might know is called Ripple, and it can complete around 1,500 transactions per second, and it can actually scale to 50,000 per second. Now, Ripple has a much better use case for financial transactions due to its speed. For example, if I wanted to pay one of my team members, normally I have to send money from my bank to an intermediary like xe.com. They then trade my pounds for dollars, and then send the dollars to my team member's bank account. And this process can actually take a few days if you're sending less popular currencies. Whereas if we use Ripple, all I have to do is get their digital wallet address and send them the relative amount of Ripple tokens. The transaction will happen almost immediately with no middleman and very, very little processing fees. And when there's trillions of dollars being transferred internationally every single day, this technology cuts out the need for countless services, saving you time and money. And this is why banks and mainstream media are scared of this technology, as it truly has the power to disrupt the status quo. Interestingly though, you can see a move towards digital currencies from a whole different direction: the government. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin sit beyond the control of governments, and governments do not like it when they don't have control. So far, that's meant that they've treated Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies with suspicion, but governments are now looking at tackling new threats to their authority in a different way by creating their own digital currencies. China launched their pilot in April of 2020, while Singapore, Canada, the Bahamas, Thailand, Sweden are just some of the countries known to be working on their own. So it's a good idea to start educating yourself on Bitcoin, crypto and digital currencies, because if a shift comes, you don't want to be left behind.
Who would have thought we could have too much treasure?
Part 3. What the next evolution means for you. Remember how I talked about HMV in one of my last videos? They failed because they refused to acknowledge the inevitable shift in technology, and you don't want to end up the same. Back in the early 2010s, when Bitcoin was first getting attention, lots of businesses started taking payments in Bitcoin. For example, Expedia, the travel company, started accepting Bitcoin back in 2014, but it quietly stopped that service in 2018. But unfortunately, plenty of businesses that took the currency found very few people that actually wanted to pay with it. But you have to wonder if they are all being short-sighted, because in 2014, when Expedia started accepting the currency, one Bitcoin was worth $639. If the company had kept one Bitcoin from then and sold it today, it would be worth over $34,000. Still, maybe jumping right into dealing with cryptocurrency is too much for most at the moment. Even so, the way you pay and otherwise interact with others and with businesses is likely to become a lot more digital very quickly. For a story about how quickly digital payment technologies can change society, let's look at Kenya. Back in 2007, Safaricom, a mobile network operator, built a service to help businesses get loans. It worked on mobile phones, and 54% of Kenyans had this installed. And that's more people than had access to banks. They called it M-Pesa, and M stands for mobile, and Pesa is Swahili for money. And the service worked for its intended purpose, but people started using it in another way, to send money to each other. So what they did is they retooled themselves around making payments, and it became a massive success. 10 years later, in 2017, there was 1.7 billion annual transactions processed using their service. And that totaled nearly 50% of Kenya's GDP. In developed countries, there's a lot of legacy systems in place that Kenya didn't have. And that means that mobile payments as a technology haven't taken off as quickly there, but it doesn't mean that things won't change. Banks are heavily investing in blockchain and other technologies that make mobile payments easier. In Europe, a group of big companies got together and announced a network last year that will make this kind of tech much easier to deploy. And in 2019, 60 financial institutions in Japan created a new smartphone payment system. So what does this mean for you? Well, on one level, it can make your life a lot more convenient, assuming you have access to the right tech and know-how. Equally though, it can make things harder. During the pandemic, many people struggled with the new cashless-only policies at supermarkets. And if cash flow is a problem, or you work cash in hand, what do you need to do to prepare your finances for the coming years? At the very least, you should be learning about how this new technology works, how to buy, store and send cryptocurrencies, because if you don't, you'll likely regret that decision when the inevitable adoption comes. Because look, the cashless society isn't with us right now, but the thing about evolution is that it's unstoppable and inevitable. So when the ground shifts beneath you, are you going to move with it? And what will you have in your pocket when it does?